We've had bourbons, we've had scotches, and today we've got a Scotsman's Dream of America. What's up, guys? My name is Chris, and you are listening to the Whiskey Noobs podcast, and today we're joined by Graham McTavish, who you might know from The Hobbit, Rambo, Outlander. I personally know him from The Witcher as Dijkstra, and he just came out with his own bourbon. Now, I know what you're thinking. We've had a lot of celebrities release a lot of whiskeys. In this interview, we specifically break down what brought him to bourbon, why he enjoys it so much. He's a Scotsman. Why is it that he decided to release a bourbon? How his acting career brought him to his love with bourbon. And we break down this release, which is known as the Warchief from McTavish Whiskey. This is a 7-year bottled and bond bourbon. We break down the mash bill. We break down what drove Graham to this specific whiskey, and I break down my review of it, of course, as well. I truly did enjoy this bourbon, and we had a great conversation. We break down all things from acting to whiskey and how those things intertwined, and we broke down where the McTavish brand is headed in the future with the whiskey journey. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode as much as I did, but without further ado, let's cut to that interview with Graham McTavish. I typically start these with how your love of whiskey began, and we are going to get to that. But I wanted to put a little spin on our conversation since the whiskey is kind of a passion project, I like to think, for you. So I wanted to actually shift gears and start with your profession and your professional life. You've been in quite a few films and shows. And so I figure a good way to start this off is, what's been your favorite experience as an actor, or a couple, whatever reaches the top 5 for you that you've had so far?
Favorite experiences. Well, I mean, I've been very, very lucky. I've had a lot of really amazing experiences actually as an actor. I've got to meet some people and work with some people that I never thought I would. And well, I mean, The Hobbit is an obvious one, because, I grew up like a lot of people with that book. I remember when Lord of the Rings came out, I went to see them on their first day at the Odeon Leicester Square. And then I went on to do The Hobbit and be in that world, be in the world of Middle-earth, knocking on Bilbo's door, walking through the green circular door, all those sort of things. And the journey sort of took on this sort of weird loop whereby I found myself walking the red carpet in the Odeon Leicester Square in London, the very place that I'd seen the premieres of all of these films, going back to, Star Wars in the 1970s, Alien, Jaws. I mean, huge iconic films. And for me to be walking on that red carpet in something like The Hobbit was a bit of an out-of-body experience, actually. So that's one. And the other one that really, I suppose, from a film point of view, that comes to mind is doing Rambo with Stallone, because I'd been a huge fan of those films. I mean, like a lot of us, I grew up with him, Schwarzenegger, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Bruce Willis, all of these guys. And that there was a moment when I was filming that, we were in Thailand, and we'd been there for a while. We'd been filming for a while. And he was coming off the boat. There was a scene where he comes off the boat, and I say, where do you think you're going? And I probably swear at him and call him every name under the sun. And a lot of it was improvised. So we had the script, but Sly was really into improv. So he said, you into improv? And I said, yeah, I love improv, yeah. And so we did a lot of our scenes that way. So he came off the boat, and I just came out with whatever was in my mind, and then he would respond, and then I'd come back, and then blah, 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 and it would go on. And we do that over and over again, different versions. But there was one moment where I was looking at him, and I can promise you, there was like a ticker tape in my mind saying, you are talking to Rambo, that you are talking to him. And it was like there was an eye observing me, an outside eye, my eye, that was looking at me doing the scene and going, what? What are you? It's like I'd stepped into the screen. It was very, very weird. So that would definitely be those two huge highlights. Doing Outlander as well, because I got to go back to Scotland, where where everything began for me, really. So I loved doing that, being back in the Highlands, learning about the history of Scotland, learning more about the history of Scotland, and really immersing myself in that. And that's that's something that's motivated me with a lot of my acting work, my writing, and now this, actually, now the whiskey is actually, or it all comes through history, weirdly enough. It's often the starting point for me with things that I get really into.
Yeah, I know whiskey for a lot of people, that can be kind of a door that opens them to whiskey, is that it's just got such a rich culture, a rich
Mm,
history.
mm,
I've spoken before that for a lot of people, there's kind of a few modes that can bring you to whiskey. History being a great one,
yeah.
especially in the United States with bourbon, with Scotch in Scotland.
Mm.
And then there's like the science aspect of it. I know some people really enjoy just how strange it is. It's still almost an art form
Oh,
because
yeah.
we don't fully understand if you put these things into a still and then age them for 7 years, what's going to come out of the
No,
other end.
it's alchemy. It's
It
it's like it's magic. It's potions. It's goes back to the dawn of time. With people experimenting with flavors and things to create. Whether it's food or drink, alcohol, whatever it is. People just sitting around saying, "Well, what about if I tried this?" And hey, let's hold back on that a little bit. And yeah, and I love that aspect of it. It's been a really interesting part of the journey for me.
Yes, alchemy is a great way to put that. I mean, if
Mm.
anybody's ever tasted or smelled a mash, which I actually saw you guys just did when you were in
No.
Kentucky, taste the mash,
Yeah.
then taste what comes out of a still, and then taste what comes out of a barrel. It seems like alchemy. It really does.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. The process that you see it going through, and it's like you leave something alone, and in its own little private secret world, completely divorced from you. It just gets on with what it wants to get on with, and whatever it comes out with. I mean, we can have control over it to some extent. And there's all sorts of fancy sort of computers that monitor temperatures and all the rest of it. But really, it is alchemy. It's happening in the dark, really. You're literally, and we get to enjoy the result.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it. And we still get to be surprised by the results sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm sure whoever was the first person to learn that different spots in a warehouse or a rick house give you different flavors was probably like
I
very
know.
confused by that.
And
It's,
often it would have been by accident as
yeah,
well.
that's how
Yeah.
so much of this happened to get to where
Yeah.
we are now with whiskey is
Yeah.
by accident.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
truth.
Love that.
So speaking of history bringing you to whiskey, I always like to ask people where their love of whiskey began. And so it sounds like for you, kind of the rich background and the rich history of whiskey is what really started to intrigue you. Break down kind of how that started and what got you to the point you're at now with loving whiskey.
Well, I mean, like, anybody from Scotland, it began with Scotch. My father enjoyed it, and he introduced us to it quite a young age, actually. And I remember him always doing toasts at the dinner table, and so it became part of the family life. So that whiskey became a family member, really, in a
Hmm.
weird sort of a way. And he would do the toast. There was a Burns toast, which is "Here's to us, war like us, guy few in the rodid," which is roughly translates as "Here's to us, who is like us, very few, and they're all dead." So and he did it every single time, and I've never forgotten it. And it's always
Wow.
made me. It just ignited. I enjoy many forms of alcohol. Well, not that. Well, yeah, I mean, beer, wine,
Hmm.
whiskey, obviously bourbon. And I like the odd margarita and things like that. Maybe a rum,
Oh yeah.
but it's the romance of it. That's
Hmm.
what really ignited it for me. It was romantic, and tying that with history, it really it's just a perfect combination for me. So when I went to America, which is now, oh gosh, nearly 20 years ago, which is really frightening. Um, I hadn't really had any experience of bourbon at all until then. And then my good friend Nolan North, who's a wonderful voiceover actor that I worked with, a fabulous actor, and he introduced me to bourbon. He's got a bit of a collection, and then I started with that, and there was always for me this sort of strange pull, because there's Scotland, and Scotland's got Scotch, and that's whiskey, and then you feel almost sort of like a heretic, you're like, but this is really nice. I really like this, and you kind of go, no, you don't. But the more I got into it, and the more I started to learn about it, the more I looked into the history of it, which then just added an extra layer to it for me. The more I became interested in the whole subject, and I am, compared to yourself and Connor and many, many other people, probably everybody listening, I am an amateur with a capital A. I'm on a learning journey that's barely begun in comparison. But like a lot of people who begin something, they just really get into it, and so that's kind of me. And I loved, particularly with bourbon. I mean, if you put the overall taste of bourbon to one side, which I personally love, I have to be careful with any Scotch drinkers out there that, I kind of prefer it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but that's no disrespect to Scotch, because I thoroughly enjoy Scotch whiskey as well. I do. It's just very different.
Right.
But when I started to look into how bourbon kind of came about, the sort of happy accidents that were going on in the 18th century that started that, which obviously ties into a period that I know a lot about with Outlander and Culloden and the post-Jacobite Revolution and the clearances from Scotland. So people coming over and bringing their love of distilled spirits with them, which was really just done on an amateur level. It wasn't industrialized at all. They just liked doing it, and they brought that with them. And then, and one of the things I absolutely love about the story of bourbon is that it's tax that really created what we know now as great bourbon whiskey. It's Washington doing what he did, saying, no, we need your money. Sorry, we really need to tax you for this. Sorry. And people going, no, you know what? I think we'll just move west. We'll just move. And then, what they took with them, what they'd already discovered, and then what they discovered when they got to Kentucky, Tennessee, etc., and the limestone and, the iron-free water and all the rest of it. It was just that kind of accidental moment in history. It's just, I love that. So, yeah.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. And I love the way you put it with that adjective romantic. I feel like that has just got to be one of the best ways to put the experience of whiskey. And there are we even just mentioned the happy accidents of trying different barrels in the warehouse and, hey, this one actually tastes really good. And then from there we get single barrel whiskey and realizing that where you age it makes a difference. How much char is on the barrel makes a difference. You've got some distilleries who their barrels were leaking and they had to put them into a second barrel, and now we have double oaked. And it was like, wow, that's something about that.
Isn't that great?
It is.
I know. And no plan. It wasn't like they sat down and said, next week we're going to try it in 2 barrels. No, we have to do it.
Right. And they were probably a little bit like, oh gosh, I hope that didn't ruin our whiskey. And then they tried it and they're like, wow.
Which also prompts the thought, what is there in the future that we'll discover? What's out there that hasn't yet materialized, that the accidents that are still waiting to happen will also affect the history of this spirit.
Yeah, I think people tend to lose sight of that a little bit, but there's so much different trial and error going on right now. It's just consistently evolving as a spirit and as a culture.
Yeah. No, I agree.
I want to ask, so as you're going through this experience and as you are enjoying whiskey, you discover bourbon, you love it. And it's got, that extra kind of sweet. I imagine coming from drinking so much scotch, it has a little bit more of that kind of that caramel vanilla flavor that the corn
Yeah,
gives you when it interacts with the barrel.
totally.
First of all, that first glass of bourbon that you had, I don't know if you can recall exactly the first one, but do you recall your interest and how much you realized it was different from scotch?
Well, I think what made me realize it, and this was, the level of lack of education of my palate. Definitely then. I mean, it's improved, but it's not. It's by no means super sophisticated. But then I was just aware of exactly what you just described. That this is sweeter. That there was a sort of more sort of a syrupy kind of feel going on to it that I really, really enjoyed. And as for what the first one was, oh my God, the only thing I know, I mean, let me think. I mean, he's quite a connoisseur. He loves his bourbon, and I associate it with the end of an evening when I first tried it. It was the end of an evening, and it was in front of an open fire. I mean, it was the sort of perfect, ridiculous setting for trying bourbon
Yes.
really for the first time. And he said, "I'm going to mix you a bourbon, mate. I'm going to mix you a bourbon, don't you know? I'm going to get something out and maybe have this." And I think maybe it was an old fashioned.
Oh,
Yes, it
yeah.
was. He made me an old fashioned. That's right, which I'd never had, and I'd never really. Yeah, I mean, cocktails. I didn't drink cocktails at all. Things like margaritas or old fashions or martinis or any of those things. All of those happened very late for me.
Okay.
Way older than you are now. I'd never tried a cocktail because it just wasn't something you did where I grew up. You
Oh.
didn't go into a pub and order a cocktail. Not where I grew up. No,
Okay.
no, no. That
A
wouldn't have been
beer or a whiskey, basically.
pretty much. Pretty much.
Yeah.
They didn't even serve wine, really.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
no, no, no. I mean, especially if no, a man ordering a glass of wine would have been unheard of, completely.
Right.
So
You go in and you ask for an old fashioned with orange bitters and a squeeze of citrus, and they probably throw you out.
pretty much,
Yeah.
pretty much, yeah. I mean, yeah, no, there's no way I would have ever done that, and it wasn't out of prejudice. It would just never
Yeah.
have occurred to me.
Right. Yeah, I find that with so many people, it takes is that one romantic experience of the
Yeah.
right glass of whiskey, the right time, the right group of people, and
Mhm.
you're just hooked. I mean, that's actually exactly how it happened to me. It was a
Yeah.
bonfire. It was an open fire. My buddy handed me some. I was like, I don't really like whiskey, and I tried it, and I'm like, well, I think I liked that just now.
No,
And
I mean, you telling me the story reminds me of what it felt like to taste it for the first time. It really does. Yeah.
yes, it's almost surprising. It's like, whoa.
Yeah. 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 Because you
Yep,
have a preconceived idea of what it's going to be like. Um,
exactly.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know, so a lot of people, such as myself, we're enthusiasts of whiskey. We enjoy consuming it. What is
Hmm.
it, and at what point did you decide you wanted to make that jump from consumer to a brand owner, to a producer?
Yeah. I mean, I'd had something, I'd had that idea sort of floating around in my mind a bit. I thought, it would be great to actually have your own that was unique to you that you'd created. And when I got together with Paul and Connor, and we were trying all sorts of different whiskeys together and all the rest of it, just for fun, actually.
Hmm.
And then they suggested, hey, well, you should think about maybe doing something with this because you enjoy it and it's something that you can speak to and the history and the connection with from Scotland to America that I'd made as an actor. I felt that there was a real connection between Scotland and America when it came to bourbon. I really felt that the weight of history of the settlers that came over, many of whom were Scots or Irish, and brought with them that understanding of distilling and all the rest of it to the United States, and they met with this unique tasting palette that they could go, oh yeah, look what we've made. We've made this new thing, and that's what really fired me up, because as an actor, my own professional journey, I started out in theatre, loved theatre, and that is a sort of, I suppose, especially when it's viewed from abroad, it's a sort of British thing, Shakespeare, which I did loads of, and all the rest of it. So that's Britain's thing. Whereas
Right.
I was always looking towards America for America's thing, which for me was film, movies. And I wanted to be a part of that. And I knew that I couldn't really ever be a part of that being in the United Kingdom. Not that we don't make great films in the United Kingdom, but it's not. It was almost like a confession that I found I was making to myself, that I don't want to play Hamlet. I want to be in Rambo.
Right.
That's it, and that is America. The America makes that happen for people like me and for Americans as well. And so that journey professionally as an actor that took me across the Atlantic is also the journey that I've found with bourbon. It sort of mirrored it in a weird kind of a way. And perhaps because of the journey that I made professionally, I was looking for that. I was going, what is it that I like so much about this drink compared with the one that I'm supposed to like back home, that I do like, that I respect and I enjoy. But what is it that it's a bit like, I'm going to put it, it's a bit like, it's a bad comparison. I always think it's like you're cheating on somebody. It's not you're cheating on somebody, but you fall in love.
Right.
And when you fall in love, you can't control where that love takes you, So you see a beautiful woman or whatever it is that you fall in love with, whoever it may be, and that you're all in. You're all in, and your life changes because of that person. You could move country. You could you could have kids. Your whole life just changes because of a love that you have for somebody, and that's similar for me when it comes to something like this. I mean, not quite on that scale, because that's a huge thing, but it's the same impetus. You see it and you go, wow, this is beautiful. I love this. This is amazing. I want more of this. I want to do this again. I want to meet bourbon again. Let's and then it becomes more and more part of your life. And the next thing you know, you're launching your own brand.
Right.
Honestly, if somebody had told me even 2 years ago or a year ago that I would be doing this, I wouldn't have believed it. I really wouldn't. So
Wow.
But that's true of many things in my life, to be fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you would have told me, kind of like the surreal moment you mentioned with Rambo, if you would have told me a year ago when I was watching The Witcher that I would be speaking with Graham McTavish right now, I don't know if I would have believed you. So.
Right. Yeah. No, well, I mean, life is, especially if you're somebody who's open to experiences and is interested in, and I would put, the making of good bourbon in with any form of artistic expression,
Yes.
creativity. If you're into that sort of thing, if you're that kind of person, life will always fill you with surprises. So.
Yes, absolutely. And so then it was over those course of the past couple years, that was when you were working with Paul and Connor. And for those listening, those are Paul and Connor from the Bourbon with Friends podcast. We've had Connor on from He Has His Own Who Gives a Dram podcast. And it was working with them that really started to bring you to where you are now with wanting to release your own brand.
Yeah. I mean, they were my enablers, really. I mean, they were the ones that took me from just this kind of dilettante sort of guy who was sort of dabbling in, like, oh yeah, I like that. That was nice. Not really knowing anything, and then just introducing me a bit more to the history, and when people are passionate about something and they really know the subject, it's infectious.
Yes.
It's infectious. And if you get to talk to the right people, they can inspire you with anything. If you, to take it back to Shakespeare, I was lucky enough to have a fantastic Shakespearean professor at university. Totally inspired me in that way, led me towards performing Shakespeare, that wouldn't necessarily have happened at all without that passion that he had. So we pass it on, and hopefully, doing this with you, any other podcasts that I do talking about my brand, will inspire and infect other people in a good way.
Yes, that's largely the part of the goal of what I do. I mean, I did call the podcast Whiskey Noobs in the beginning because that was kind of, I wanted to share this passion with people. And I love this long form content because I think this is a great way for you to discuss what brought you to whiskey, because, and you mentioned it, and it's right there on the bottle, a Scotsman's dream of America. It seems more likely that you would create a Scotch. But there's something so authentic about you going with bourbon instead, because it's saying, no, I know you would expect me to want to create a Scotch. That's where I'm from. But I just love bourbon so much that's what actually hooked me. And I think there's an authenticity there.
Yeah. No, I mean, you couldn't have put it better. That's exactly true. And I would have actually felt, I mean, that's, the country I am from is famous for Scotch whiskey, but I would have actually felt a little bit of a fraud in some ways, not to actually be true to the thing that I was falling more and more in love with, I suppose, is one way of putting it. And that was bourbon. So, I'd it's a funny thing, with Scotch, and I have had Scotch whiskey that I've really loved. But there was always a tiny little bit of me that was sort of saying, well, this is what I should be feeling. And, it's like that little voice in the back of your head going, yeah, but this isn't really what you want, is it? You want that. And, our minds play tricks with us when it comes to that sort of stuff. And it was, again, to go back to my own professional career, that was the thing for me, there was something that happened that really precipitated my move to America, which I won't go into now. It's a big, long story, nothing extraordinary, but it was just that I needed a push, it was something I'd been thinking about. Again, I was thinking about, this is where I'm from. I live here. I live in the UK. This is where my friends are. But I felt the pull of America and the push of circumstance that led me to make that jump. And I think the best things that you do in life are when you transform that energy into action. You actually commit to it, and you sort of metaphorically close a door behind you, and that forces you to open another door in front of you. And I feel like that's also a little bit of what I've been doing.
Yeah, I think that's a great philosophy to have. I know that there's a lot of times with people, if you have that door open behind you, you're going to want to keep looking back at it. And if you close it, you're like, okay, I got to march forward now. That's what I have to do to keep moving forward.
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing happens when you have children, by the way.
Yeah.
When you have children, it's that door that you've always been looking at in the house, and you've gone, I've always been interested to find out what's inside that room. I wanted to go in there. Here you go. You know what? Today I'm going to go in the room. I'm going to go in. And you open the door and you go in the room and you shut the door behind you. And it's like, yeah, I like this room. This is a cool room. This is interesting. I am enjoying it. I'm going to come back to this room, but I'm just going to leave for a minute. And then you turn around and there's no handle on the inside of the door.
Right.
And that's children. It's like, oh no, you're not leaving. You're in the room with children now. And I think, but that's a very positive, if you embrace it, I think it's a really positive thing in your life.
Yes. I haven't crossed that specific threshold yet, but I get exactly what you mean.
I'm telling you, it's the door. Just remember the door.
Yes. And that there won't be a handle when I turn around.
That's right, mate. But it'll be great inside the room. So.
Yes. Now, as you mentioned a little bit earlier, you're definitely learning and evolving with this brand.
Yeah.
And I know that this is your first release, so this is called the Warchief.
The Warchief.
Was there a specific kind of muse or anything specific that inspired you for the Warchief itself? Or are you planning to use any specific inspiration for potential future releases, or kind of
I
break
mean,
down that creative process there?
I came up with a lot of names, some of which, I intend to use in the future. But this was to me a nod to a part of my career,
Hmm.
which is somebody who's been involved in playing characters that are associated with that sort of stuff. I just think it's kind of, it appeals to me. I love words, and I love the power of words, and the feelings they elicit when they're spoken or read, and I think the War Chief is, it's that's a tall, broad-shouldered bottle of bourbon. That's and that actually fed into the choice of bottle for us. When I was looking at the bottle samples, I really I wanted the kernel, that shape, because it made me think of, this is a whiskey that stands tall. It's right there. It's got, it's big chested. It's like, yeah, check this
Yeah.
out. And so there's a little bit of that in there, and also that it's a playful thing. It's a playful
Hmm.
thing. I mean, people associate me somewhat with Dougal Mackenzie from Outlander, and in that, Dougal Mackenzie is the war chief of Clan Mackenzie. So it seemed like a fun little reference to something that some people may know about.
Yeah, I like that a lot, and I think the palette, which we'll talk about here in a
Mm.
second, really
Yes.
it goes with it as well. I mean, I know specifically when I was tasting it, you get some of that rye, or that vanilla and that caramel on the front.
Yes.
And then it's not super high rye, but there is a good amount of rye. I believe 21% rye.
21%. Yeah.
And that spice, I almost get a little bit of tobacco. It
Mm.
puts forward, kind of like you mentioned, that broad shouldered war chief type of flavor.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a strength to it that is not necessarily related to its, alcohol content, but it's just as the body, the strength, the power that I like. And you're right, that high rye element. It just gives it that kind of, you talk about tobacco. I detect a bit of kind of, baking spice, sort of fruitcake
Yes.
thing going on in it as well, that I love. It has that sort of density, if that's the right word, and
Yeah.
associations with things for me that are really comforting and memorable from the past. I bring that into it when I taste it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's such an important part of whiskey. That's one of my all time favorite things about enjoying whiskey that really hooked me
Mm,
is the association with the past. You try one and it just pulls you back to a different one that you had, or the last time you had it, and
yeah,
it's such a nice experience to have.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. So for those listening, so the War Chief from
Mm,
McTavish Spirits is a bottled and bond bourbon,
yeah.
7 years old. This is sourced from MGP. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
And
Correct.
it is 75% corn, 21% rye, and 4% malted barley.
Correct.
And that rye and that corn, I mean, that's a very sort of traditional bourbon
Mm,
recipe, mash bill,
yeah.
which I imagine is what you were shooting for, since, like you said, bourbon kind of hooked you.
Yeah, 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 exactly. I mean, and it was a sort of bit of a chicken and egg thing. I wasn't, with my understanding, my early understanding of bourbon, I didn't realize that it was that was really hooking me in at the beginning. That exact kind of mash bill, those sort of relative quantities and measurements, and that's what led to the choices that were made.
Yes. And I did break down a quick review of it. Actually, not a quick review. I took my time with it and I really enjoyed it. And I let it kind of change in the glass a little bit.
Oh,
And that's
nice.
one thing I noticed was that and this is always for me a characteristic of a slightly higher end, more enticing whiskey
Mm,
is
mm.
in the glass. It started to change as it sat. When
Mm.
I first poured it, I got like a nice on the nose, a light sugar, a vanilla,
Yeah, definitely.
very sweet forward.
Yeah.
And then as it sat, this can be the glass changing, this can be your nose changing as you're acquainting to it. But those spices kind of came out.
Yeah.
It had a note to it that I couldn't even pin down. I
Mm.
still it always I get this on some bourbons. It reminds me of like a strong like Coca-Cola or like the smell of a pop, and I think it's the spice. I think it's a certain kind of
Mm.
spice that I haven't nailed down yet.
Mm. Maybe like almost a sort of a cherry cola, maybe like there's that kind of thing in it. Perhaps I know what you mean.
Yes.
That for me, a sort of a memory from when I was very young. That kind of flavor. Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it could be kind of that like a dark cherry
Yeah.
interacting with a spice that
Yeah.
creates kind of like Dr. Pepper kind of has that flavor to it. It could be like that sort
Correct.
of yeah.
Yes. Right.
And
It's funny.
and then I moved to the palate, and you get instead of that light sugar and vanilla, you get kind of more of a caramel, more of a syrup. Uh,
Uh-huh.
and then as it sat on my palate, it started to evolve to I mentioned tobacco and like a dark chocolate, and
Mm.
then finished with that spice. So
Yeah.
it's very much um, it's got the traditional bourbon roots to it, but it very much has a nice complexity and a nice kind of change and interplay of the notes on the
Yeah.
palate.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad to hear that you feel that. Yes, that's definitely
Yes.
the plan. Yeah.
Yeah. I even mentioned to Connor a specific bottle that I won't mention because I don't want to put down any other brands. But I grabbed a bottled and bond of a similar price range afterward, and I tried it because I like to kind of ground myself. Right after the glass, and I was like,
Mm.
no, I like the Warchief better. Actually, I was really
Yes.
enjoying it. Yeah, yeah,
Yes. The
yes.
Warchief. Yes.
The the Warchief's first victory. Yeah,
That's right. Yes, exactly. Yeah. I like
yeah.
that. Warchief's first victory. Very good. Yeah.
Yes, and then in typical bourbon fashion, it very much finished with an oakiness. That
Mm.
wood stayed on the palate,
Yeah.
and it,
Yeah.
it stuck around for quite a while. I got a
Yeah.
nice oakiness on my tongue for a little while.
Yeah.
Now, comparing to those notes, what about it do you specifically like? Because everybody's palate is different, but when
Yeah.
you
I mean,
tasted it, what about it drew you in?
well, I mean, you've actually covered a lot of what I felt, that sort of, sweet vanilla, at the on the nose, that you had the caramel and the chocolate that was going on. Definitely a bit of cinnamon in there with the high rye was giving it that sort of cinnamony, fruit cake. That kind of Christmas fruitcake kind of feel to it that I really love. That sort of
Hmm.
that memory burst from the past that I loved. Um, and then, yeah, I mean, on the palate, again, it's sort of on the tip of the tongue. It for me, it had that vanilla-y, the sweet vanilla on the tip. But as you let it settle, and as it went down, lingering on the back of the throat, it's definitely got that sort of dark cherry element that I was talking about. And I guess, in terms of a finish, I would say I'm probably sort of hedging a little bit here, but sort of medium long finish
Hmm.
for me. Not super long, medium long,
Yeah.
and yeah, just the thing that you said about letting it sit in the glass for a bit, and the changes that happen. You add a bit of water and it changes it again, and I love that variety that you can get, and the way that a bourbon expresses itself over time that you can do. And it's, as I say, look, I'm learning like all the time. I've learned even just talking to you, actually. It truly, it's when I've started this right back to when I was with Nolan back in his living room, in front of that fire. That journey that I started then with bourbon. I mean, I'm still, I'm in the foothills. I'm not even close to being, climbing the mountain of bourbon like many people have. So this is for me a great opportunity to, if I hate that kind of celebrity tag that gets put with these things. It sort of makes me wince a bit. But if I have any, I just hope that this helps bring, bourbon to a wider audience, and in the process, my own interpretation of that spirit. And that's, if that happens, then I'll be very happy.
Yeah, and I'll let you in on a little secret. Since I've been doing this podcast for a little while, the higher you climb that mountain, the higher the top goes when it comes to whiskey.
It's like all mountains.
Yes,
yes, it's true.
Every guest I have, I learned something. I mean, it never ends. It truly doesn't.
Yeah.
I think that'll be fun, though, as now, correct me if I'm wrong, you are planning to do potentially future releases as well, like different
Correct.
types. So I really think that's going to be fun. As you mentioned, you're starting this journey, and we're going to get to kind of see how that evolves, how maybe the muse that you pick for each bottle kind of evolves and where you go with that.
For sure. I'm interested in a Scotch finish. There's all sorts of releases. There's something that I'm interested in, more of a sort of seasonal, Christmassy sort of bourbon that I've sort of been dabbling with the guys, and we have big plans. We definitely have big plans, and I'm in it. I'm in it for the long haul. This is something I don't want to be seen as somebody who's just sort of putting his face to something and then just sort of walking away. I'm really, I'm committed to actually being in the front lines. Not just doing podcasts like this, but actually going and doing tastings, live tastings. Anything I can do to connect more with the bourbon community and for them to experience what I'm trying to offer.
That's a great way to put it too. I think because you mentioned, that like that celebrity tag, you don't want it to look like you're just like, oh, people follow me and I bottled this up for you.
Yeah.
But I can't think of another quote unquote celebrity brand that's been dedicated to the point of doing multiple releases, continually kind of evolving the spirit. I mean, I think that shows, and this isn't anything against other celebrity brands. I've had some that I really like. But I do think it shows an actual interest from you in the spirit, that you're actually doing that and you're trying to continue to learn about it and produce new releases.
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, it's sort of been the path that I've had with anything that I've been involved in. I can't really, I can't get involved if I'm not really interested in it.
Right.
I can't just sort of do a backseat sort of experience of, whether it's writing a book or if it's acting, if it's, I've written plays, anything that I've tried to get involved in, and this being the latest thing that I've sort of thrown myself into. Yeah, and I'm really proud of this whiskey. I'm really genuinely proud of it. And I'm really excited for people to try it. But I also know that the best is yet to come for me. And that's where I'm heading. That's what I want. I want to really explore and try new styles, new ways of putting this out there. So this is the beginning for me.
That's great to hear. It really is. And I think, I've drank a good number of quote unquote celebrity whiskeys. Some great ones, some less than great ones. I think you did a great job with this. And I don't just say that.
Thank you.
Of course. I don't have anybody on the podcast that I don't like their whiskey. That's a stipulation for me. Yes. Yeah. Yes. And I think you did a great job. I'm absolutely going to be getting a bottle. I can't wait. I know the bottles are we're recording this. This will release next week, but we're recording this just as the brand released. So,
yes. Yes, like
Yes.
2 days ago. Yes, correct.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'll be grabbing a bottle, and I'll put in the show notes where everybody can get that from. What is the website again?
McTavishSpirits.com. I happen to have a bottle right in front of me. There it
There
is.
you go. Yeah, show it off. That's
There
a
it is.
great label as well.
Thank you. This was designed by one of my oldest friends.
Oh,
Emma Quinn designed this. She's a
yes.
wonderful woman, and I've known her for about 35 years. So, and I've really enjoyed that side of this as well. That I've really been. I mean, Paul and Connor are new in my life in terms of my career, etc. But I've been working as well with a lot of people that I've known for a very long time. So.
Yes. Yeah, that's great, and I think it showcases it well. I love how you mentioned it all ties together as the Warchief. That's just me. I love that about whiskeys. I love when there's a story. You guys give out the information of what it is and the mash bills, which I love. That's like a big thing for me as well.
Sure.
And yeah, it all ties together great. So, if nothing else, I would just say, as somebody who enjoys the consuming side of it, excellent job with designing this and bringing. Yes, of course. And as a big fan of The Witcher, excellent job this past season. Oh man, I'm excited to see where this one goes.
Yes, I know. I'm interested to find out too. It's going to be very interesting actually, and I have an inkling of some of the things that are going to be happening, but I'm not going to give anything away. But yeah, there's a lot of fun coming. Yes.
Yes, they always leave me on a cliffhanger. I didn't even know I was watching the last episode, and I was like,
know.
"That's it."
Yeah, they're awful, aren't they? I know.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Yep. And I think Outlander's in the future for me. I have a friend who's a huge fan of it, so I think I'm gonna have to dig into that next. Yes.
But yeah, go for it. Start with season 1. Get to know Dougal Mackenzie.
Yes, sounds good. All right. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to say? Any closing thoughts you'd like to add?
No, I mean, I feel like we've covered everything, and it's been a delight to be on the show. It's been great for me to be able to talk about something that I've been working on for a while, that I've been having to keep secret, that I've been wanting to tell everybody about, and finally I'm able to do so. And thank you for allowing me to do that.
Yes, of course. Thank you for coming on the show. I think that excitement, that authenticity, it shows. And I'm really excited to see. I'm excited to get a bottle of this and get deeper into it. And I'm excited to see the future releases that come out. I think it's very exciting. I personally know Connor very well, and you're working with some great folks as well. And I think as a group, you guys are really onto something. And I'm excited to see where it goes.
Thanks, mate. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Of course. Well, thank you for coming on. And right. I know it's a little later there for you than it is for me here, but enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks, mate. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you guys for listening to another episode of Whiskey Noobs. If you need more Whiskey Noobs content in your life, make sure you check out our Patreon page in the show notes. And if you like the show, please make sure to leave a 5-star rating or review. It only takes a couple of minutes, and they're way more helpful than people realize. If you want to do tastings alongside the show, make sure you join the email list by sending an email to whiskeynoobspodcast@gmail.com with a subject line that says email list. You'll receive monthly emails with a list of the whiskeys that will be featured throughout the month so that you can buy them ahead of time. You can also find more Whiskey Noobs content on Instagram @whiskey_noobs and on TikTok @whiskeynoobspodcast. Once again, thank you guys for listening. The Whiskey Noobs podcast does not support underage or otherwise irresponsible consumption of alcohol.